what historians call America's only truly indigenous art form, was born in a city that wasn't sure it was American. New Orleans had been French, then Spanish, then French again. Purchased by the United States in 1803, it was still a city where people spoke French, practiced voodoo, buried their dead with brass bands, and gathered on Sundays in a dusty square to play drums. The United States did not give them jazz. They gave it to the United States. Why did this city, at the mouth of the Mississippi, built on slavery and contradiction, produce a sound that would rewrite the entire musical grammar of the modern world? Why not Charleston? Why not Havana? The answer begins in Congo Square. To understand why jazz could only have emerged in New Orleans, you have to see what this city was before the word existed. The Choctaw called this place Bulbancha, place of many tongues, already a trading crossroads of multiple nations. The French founded La Nouvelle Orléans in 1718 on high ground at a bend of the Mississippi, adjacent to a trade route through Bayou St. John, giving whoever held it control of the entire river valley. What followed was a century of layered colonialism. French, Spanish, briefly French again, then American. Each administration treated race and slavery differently. French law under the Code Noir, implemented in 1724, required enslaved people receive Catholic baptism. Spanish manumission policies allowed the purchase of freedom. The result? A substantial, legally recognized community of free people of color, something almost nowhere else in North America had. By 1805, the city held roughly 10,000 residents, 1,556 free black residents and 3,105 enslaved. In 1809, refugees from the Haitian Revolution arrived, doubling the city's French-speaking population in 12 months. By 1840, New Orleans was the wealthiest and third most populous city in the United States. Then Louisiana passed the Separate Car Act in 1890. Homer Plessy, a New Orleans Creole of color, 7/8 white by ancestry, deliberately boarded a whites-only train car as a civil rights test case. In 1896, the Supreme Court ruled 7-1 in Plessy versus Ferguson, legalizing separate but equal. For jazz, that ruling was paradoxically a catalyst. New Orleans had operated under a three-tier racial hierarchy: white, Creole of color, and black. Plessy collapsed it into binary. Creole musicians trained in European classical tradition were suddenly pushed into closer contact with musicians schooled in the blues. Picture Congo Square on a Sunday afternoon in the 1820s. Benjamin Latrobe, the architect, wrote down what he saw in 1819. 500 to 600 enslaved people assembled, playing drums, gourds, banjo-like instruments, quills made from reeds strung like pan flutes, marimbas, violins, and tambourines, dancing the bambula, the kalinda, the juba. A city ordinance from 1817 had restricted any gathering of enslaved Africans to one location, and that location preserved something the rest of the continent had destroyed. In the 1830s, Marie Laveau, the most powerful voodoo queen in the city, led her own rituals there. The square wasn't just music, it was survival culture. Under the Black Codes, African drumming was outlawed in Protestant colonies and states. Traditions that survived in Cuba and Haiti did not survive in Virginia or South Carolina. New Orleans was the single exception. Congo Square kept those rhythms alive when the rest of North America had silenced them. The enslaved community of New Orleans came primarily from West Africa: Senegambia, Angola, Congo. Records show that Bakongo and Mbundu people from Angola represented 35.4% of all those with African heritage in Louisiana. Their music carried the tresillo, the fundamental rhythmic cell of the African diaspora, a pattern that skips, anticipates, swings. Wynton Marsalis has called it The New Orleans clave, the structural pulse underneath all New Orleans music. Rhythm alone does not make jazz. Jazz needed harmony, and harmony came from Europe and Cuba. Musicians from Havana and New Orleans were taking twice-daily ferry runs between the two cities. Musicologist John Storm Roberts wrote that the habanera reached the U.S. 20 years before the first rag was published. Jazz historian Ernest Borneman looked at what preceded New Orleans jazz before 1890 and simply called it Afro-Latin music, nearly indistinguishable from what was playing in Havana. Add European marches, French quadrilles, Catholic hymns, spirituals, ragtime, and the blues. Add cheap used military band instruments acquired from pawn shops, cornets, and trombones played by people who had taught themselves. Then Buddy Bolden lit the fire. Charles Joseph Buddy Bolden, a New Orleans cornetist, born in 1877, rearranged the typical dance band between 1900 and 1907. String instruments became the rhythm section. Clarinets, trombones, and his cornet went to the front line. He invented the Big Four, the first syncopated bass drum pattern to break from the standard march beat. Ted Gioia wrote that Bolden had mastered the recipe for it, which combined the rhythms of ragtime, the bent notes and chord patterns of the blues, and an instrumentation drawn from New Orleans brass bands. Bolden left no recordings. The loudest voice at the birth of jazz is a silence. He suffered an acute psychotic episode in 1907, was admitted to the Louisiana State Insane Asylum, and never left. He died there in 1931. Meanwhile, across Rampart Street, a boy named Ferdinand Lamothe was telling his great-grandmother he worked nights at a barrel factory. When she discovered he was playing piano in Storyville's brothels, she disowned him. He recalled her exact words, "Devil music would surely bring about my downfall." He took the public name Morton, chosen to protect his Creole family from the shame of what he was becoming. Jelly Roll Morton was jazz's first arranger, the man who proved improvisation could be written down. His composition, Jelly Roll Blues, published in 1915, was among the first jazz pieces in print. He worked out his innovations in Storyville, playing piano all hours of the day and night. On July 6, 1897, the city passed Ordinance No. 1332, creating a legal prostitution zone bounded by Iberville, Bazin, St. Louis, and North Robertson streets. Modeled on red light districts in northern German and Dutch ports, the district stretched from 50-cent cribs to Basin Street mansions charging $10 a visit. The madams paid musicians. That freedom gave performers room to experiment. Here is the receipt. Morton put it in his own words. Now, in one of my earliest tunes, New Orleans Blues, you can notice the Spanish tinge. In fact, if you can't manage to put tinges of Spanish in your tunes, you will never be able to get the right seasoning, I call it, for jazz. The Spanish tinge was the habanera rhythm, from Havana, descended from the West African tresillo, and Morton treated it not as influence, but as structural necessity. New Orleans sat at the mouth of the Mississippi. Ships from Cuba, Haiti, West Africa, and Europe arrived constantly. All of it funneled into a city small enough that a cornetist in Storyville and a brass band in Treme were within earshot on any given night. Then the collision was deliberately ended. In October 1917, Secretary of War Newton D. Baker ordered the closure of all segregated zones near Army training camps. 4 soldiers had been killed in Storyville within weeks. Mayor Martin Berman said, before signing the order, "You can make it illegal, but you can't make it unpopular." By midnight of November 12, 1917, Storyville was closed. The musicians went north. They took the music with them. Louis Armstrong had grown up hearing the music through Storyville's walls, selling coal door to door as a teenager. He learned the cornet at the Colored Waif's Home for Boys, sent there at age 11 after firing a blank pistol on New Year's Eve. He left for Chicago in 1922 at the invitation of King Oliver. His Hot 5 recordings, beginning in 1925, produced 24 records in 12 months. Heebie-Jeebies, recorded in 1926, was among the first documented examples of scat singing. Armstrong's Melancholy Blues is on the Voyager Golden Record. One city's music now travels through interstellar space. Meanwhile, the man who organized jazz's grammar was being erased. In 1935, Morton's King Porter Stomp, arranged by Fletcher Henderson, became Benny Goodman's first hit. Morton received no royalties. In 1938, stabbed in Washington, D.C., a whites-only hospital refused to treat him. He died in 1941. The first jazz group to record was the all-white original Dixieland Jazz Band in New York in 1917. Black New Orleans musician Paul Barnes said later, "To tell the facts, as far as we blacks were concerned, it was New Orleans music, not Dixieland jazz. Those boys, they made that up." The Great Migration carried jazz northward. 6 million black Americans moved from the South to northern cities between 1910 and 1970. The music fractured into swing, bebop, rock and roll, soul, and hip-hop. The rhythmic grammar of modern popular music traces to the Tresillo, preserved in Congo Square. New Orleans hosted the Jazz and Heritage Festival on Congo Square's ground starting in 1970. The square had been renamed Beauregard Square in 1893 after a Confederate general to suppress mass black gatherings. The city council restored the name Congo Square in 2011. So why New Orleans and not somewhere else? Because nowhere else had all of it at once. The port connecting West Africa to Cuba to the Mississippi Valley. Colonial legal systems that preserved African drumming when the rest of America had outlawed it. A three-tier racial hierarchy holding distinct musical traditions in tension, until Jim Crow collapsed it and forced them into the same rooms. A commercial district that paid musicians to experiment. A river carrying the music northward the moment the district closed. Jazz was not invented in spite of New Orleans' contradictions. It was invented because of them. Eubie Blake recalled the word was spelled J-A-S-S, dirty slang. The Army shut down the district that incubated it. The only result, it spread everywhere. If New Orleans gave jazz to Chicago, what did Chicago do with it?